The NFL Scouting Combine is a week away. Cap casualties on the Dolphins could be in play for the division, and the Max Crosby sweepstakes continue. Hello, everyone, and welcome into First and North. I'm Cassie Carlson. Joining me this week, we have the voice of the Lions, Dan Miller. We have Tim Van Voren from Fox Milwaukee and Pierre Nugent from Fox Minneapolis. We'll be getting you up to speed on all things going on in the NFC North. I want to start with the NFL ranking all 32 teams' rookie draft classes from last year now that the season's over. And here's how the NFC North fared. The Bears lead the list. They are ranked first overall with an A, and one of only two teams alongside the Browns to receive a solid A. Detroit ranks 16th with a B, Vikings 28th with a C, and rounding out the list, the Packers ranked last with a D+. Tim, your reaction to how the Packers rookie class was viewed?
Cassie, if they were grading at the moment, draft excitement at the moment, the Packers would have been A+. Remember, it was in Green Bay. Matthew Golden was there. Everybody was all excited. First wide receiver, first round in decades, and it just never really panned out. Golden wasn't a flop. He just didn't produce a whole lot. Second round pick, Anthony Belton, I think is getting undervalued a little bit. I like him as a contributor, but from then on down, guys just didn't play a whole lot. So when you're a draft and develop team, the Packers always stress the big gain is from year 1 to year 2. So they'll probably accept this grade with the hopes of being much higher after year 2.
Pierre, I'm sure you're not surprised, based off of the track record of Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, who was fired, that the Vikings didn't fare too well on this list either.
No, they really didn't. And at the same time, too, I think a lot of people need to remember that the Vikings didn't have a lot of draft capital in last year's draft after trades happening in the previous draft trying to get up and get J.J. McCarthy. So they were a little depleted in terms of draft capital. But they did have Donovan Jackson, who was their first-round pick at guard. I think he's had a pretty nice rookie season. Did miss a few games with some injury, but at the same time, too, it doesn't really surprise me, no, that this was a D grade for the Minnesota Vikings. However, I tend to reserve judgment for draft classes till we're about 3 years out. I think you need to give draft classes about 3 years to give them a fair evaluation. I know everybody is an instant gratification type of society, but I think everybody needs to give some of these young players a little bit of time to season before really grading them and judging them on their play. I'd give it about 2-3 seasons.
All right, Dan, you okay with a B? That's passing.
Yeah, I think that's about where the Lions are right now, and I think it's got the potential to certainly, as Pierre said, when you should really be looking at this, be regarded as a much better draft class. I think they really like the way Tyleik Williams came out at the end of the year. I think they're looking at him as one of the major guys that they'll have in the middle of that defensive line. Tate Ratledge is going to be a starter for a long time on the offensive line. Miles Frazier is going to have a chance to compete for a job this year, something he didn't really get to do last year because he wasn't active until the middle of the season because of an injury. He might end up at guard. He might end up at tackle. That's still up in the air a little bit. And then a couple of guys who really didn't get much in the way of playing time. Lovett, I think, has a chance to be a return guy and kind of a gadget player for them this year. He'll have to win the job. And then Hassanin, that's a project. We'll see how that comes along. And for the Lions, I think looking at it, Isaac Tesla is another guy that came on big time at the end of last year. I think they're looking at him as having a much bigger role this coming season. So I think whatever you want to say, B is fine, but I think the potential is there to where you can see a number of these guys being very significant contributors to this team.
Pierre, I know you said you talked about instant gratification. I feel like that's what we had here in Chicago with the Bears draft class and the first under Ben Johnson. And you can point to Colston Loveland, who people were like, did they take the right tight end or should they have taken Tyler Warren 10th overall? And then just seeing the way he played the second half of the season, leading all rookies, receivers in receptions, receiving yards, and touchdowns. And it was him paired with Luther Burden, who was an early second-round pick, that really came on too. And I think it was the way Ben Johnson talked about his rookies that he trusted all of them by the end of the season. Kyle Monungai, a 7th-round pick, one of the last running backs taken in the draft. We knew that was a huge need for the Bears, and to see the way he came on later in the season to be a compliment to DeAndre Swift and lead the 3rd-ranked rushing offense in the league was part of the reason why not only do we have excitement about the years to come with this draft class, but also Ben Johnson and the influence that he'll have and who the Bears bring in when they talk about personnel. All right, ESPN's Bill Barnwell mocked up a bunch of possible trades and what they could look like. And Pierre, going back to you, knowing J.J. McCarthy had a hard time staying healthy and when he was, struggled while he was on the field, the Vikings could be on the lookout for a quarterback to bring some competition to the room. So he proposed the Vikings dipping back into Kyle Shanahan's backup, trading for Mac Jones and a 2027 3rd-round pick for a 26th second-rounder, conditional 27th 5th-rounder, and conditional 28th 3rd-rounder. Do you like it?
To be perfectly honest, I think it's a little too rich for my blood. However, I do think Mac Jones would be an interesting fit here in Minnesota. But the reason why I say I think it's a little too rich for my blood is because he's going to be on the last year of his contract. Now, if he is coming into Minnesota and he plays very, very well, now you're left with the decision between J.J. McCarthy and Mac Jones. A similar situation that you had between J.J. McCarthy and Sam Darnold just last year. And I know we're going to have a new regime leading things in the front office for Minnesota. But as much as I like the notion of Mac Jones potentially being a complementary piece to this Vikings offense in terms of draft equity that I'm giving up to get him, I'm not so sure I'm going to be going that route. There are too many names from the past that have really kind of soured my thinking on this. You're looking at guys like A.J. Feely, Matt Castle, Kevin Cobb. These are the kind of names where into a game at some point in the season, maybe takes the reins for a half of a season, plays well, but then fizzles out in a different place. I'm still old enough to remember Jeff Hostetler from back in the day going from the Giants to the Raiders, who had a pretty decent career in his own right. But listen, I'm not going to just jump with 2 feet into the pool of Mac Jones just because he had a solid 8 games with the San Francisco 49ers. It's going to take a lot more of a bargaining chip for me to be able to part ways with a second-round draft pick. That's my point of view on it.
All right, well, let's listen to what Albert Breer had to say about the possibility of Kyler Murray to the Vikings.
The Minnesota Vikings brought in Sam Darnold, got a great year out of him, brought in Daniel Jones, sort of revived his stock, just having him there as a backup, gave him a little bit of a chance to reset at the end of the 24 season, and had good enough experience with both those guys that they tried to bring each one of them back as insurance against J.J. McCarthy. So, like, when I look at Kyler, like, it would be a landing spot like that, right?
My sense right now, after asking around, is all the top quarterbacks that will be or could be available. Kyler Murray, Smith comes to mind. This is the place they want to go, is Minnesota, because of what you have with Justin Jefferson, Kevin O'Connell, a lot of pieces in place.
All right, Kyler Murray, also a Vikings fan growing up, and you just mentioned, or we just heard Kevin O'Connell's name is part of the reason why that's such an intriguing landing spot for Murray, who would probably have to get cut by the Cardinals because of his contract situation. But would he be someone that would maybe change your mind of your previous point?
Cassie, I'm really torn on this situation because as much as I'm still a believer in the talent of Kyler Murray, I just don't know what kind of player I'm getting with Kyler Murray. Is he still going to be the young, dynamic, dual-threat quarterback that we saw in the first few years in the league, or is he going to be the guy who's going to be unavailable due to injury? I'm not sure exactly what type of quarterback I'm getting right now with Kyler Murray. And when you look at the coaching history of Kevin O'Connell hasn't traditionally worked with the type of quarterbacks that are considered to be dual threat. You're talking about guys like Kirk Cousins, Matt Stafford, even Alex Smith back when Kevin O'Connell was with Washington. These are not the traditional dual threat type quarterbacks that Kevin O'Connell is accustomed to working to. So I'm not entirely convinced that Kyler Murray would be a perfect 100% good fit in Minnesota. I would be intrigued by the possibility, certainly so, but I'm not necessarily convinced that Kyler Murray would be a good fit in Kevin O'Connell's scheme.
All right, I also read that the Cardinals are intrigued by Bears backup quarterback Tyson Bagent, who signed an extension last season. He is an undrafted free agent out of a Division II Shepherd University. I don't see this happening because I think he is the pride and joy of the Bears scouting department. The fact that they went out and found him and they were able to extend him, I don't see them giving him up. And I think that Ben Johnson sees a lot of himself in Tyson Bagent, and they want to hold on to that asset in their building. We also know the Bears are in need of a pass rusher. Max Crosby is a big name that's generating a ton of buzz around the league, and Barnwell projected the Bears getting Crosby and a 2027 fifth-round pick for DJ Moore and this year's first-round pick. This to me was shocking that it would be such a low ask to get Max Crosby with just DJ Moore in a first-round pick. I thought it was going to take multiple first-round picks just based off what we saw Micah Parsons going for last year to the Packers. And so I think if you're Ryan Poles and you're knowing that you need an edge rusher and Max Crosby is the shiny object that's going to be available on the trade market, that to me would be a no-brainer because I think that is going to be the difference maker on this defense, not only talking about getting pressure on quarterbacks, but helping out a secondary that really had to fend for themselves. And obviously they led the league in takeaways, but to me that's an anomaly and you can't sustain that year after year. So addressing the edge rusher with Max Crosby only for a first-round pick and DJ Moore, which DJ Moore obviously an asset to the wide receiver room. I think they could lose one receiver in that room and still be okay given the fact that Luther Burden has a similar play style. I would do that in a heartbeat. And then I got to add this too. We saw Caleb Williams, a guest on Max Crosby's podcast today. So there's already a relationship brewing there, and I know they can't do any tampering, but that seems like it was planted perfectly at this time of the year. And Dan, I want to go to you now because teams are starting to release players. The Dolphins yesterday releasing Tyreek Hill and Bradley Chubb. Is Chubb someone you think would fit into the Lions' needs? And I also saw when they look at free agents, Joey Bosa could be one too.
Yeah, I think they're going to kick the tires on all defensive linemen because Al-Quadin Mohammed is a free agent, and he logged a lot of snaps for them, double-digit sacks last year. Don't know if they're going to be able to re-sign him or he might get more significant money from somebody else. I think the Marcus Davenport experiment is over after a couple of years now, and they're going to need to figure out that side opposite of Aiden Hutchinson. So whether it's Chubb, whether it's Bosa, every time it seems like a defensive lineman is out there either unemployed or seemingly available, the Lions are mentioned, whether it's Judon or Clowney or Phillips last year who ended up going to the Eagles. And I do think there will be some movement on that defensive line. They have to add bodies and players and guys with some ability because these are guys that are going to get some significant snaps. But I will tell you this, sometimes the way we view players is not the same way they view players. So it's going to come down to how they perceive a guy as a fit on their defensive line and what that ultimate price is going to be and how it fits into the cap.
Tim, going to you, do you think Chubb could be an option in Green Bay? Because sounds like people don't think Rashawn Gary will be there next year.
Yeah, Rashawn Gary is probably going to be a cap casualty in Green Bay. Chubb would be a name that's on the list. You talk about shiny things. Packer free agency in general is not the shiny thing. It's kind of, well, that's the pewter. It's the brush nickel. You know, we'll go for something that's out there, but it's not quite at the same level. And I would think, based on where the Packers are with the cap this year, and that they don't have the high-end draft capital either, having made that Micah Parsons trade, that's kind of where they'll be shopping. Not necessarily the bargain bin, but not necessarily the elite level free agent that they'd be looking to bring in.
Dan, I want to go back to you because the Lions' offensive line was always considered the best, one of the best in the league, and the play dipped a little bit last year because of all the last-minute changes. Then former offensive lineman Dan Skipper is retiring and now goes to their coaching staff. I know he's a fan favorite as a player. What kind of impact do you think he'll have on the staff?
Well, I think he's a guy that you look at and you understand that he was somebody who had to grind in this league, and his work ethic is what ultimately helped him find a spot. He bounced around, wasn't really a fit in much of any place. Then all of a sudden he found a role in Detroit as that sixth offensive lineman, as that swing tackle, as the guy that would come in when they went to their jumbo packages. And he carved out a spot for him in this league and became an important player on a team. I think other guys respect that. I think other guys understand that's kind of what this league is. Not everybody walks into a starting job. Not everybody becomes rich right away in this league because you're a pro football player. Some guys have to fight, scratch, and claw, and Dan Skipper is one of those guys. We've seen it before with Don Muhlbach, who went from being a player to being on this coaching staff. He's widely respected by the players, and I think you'll see the same thing with Skipper. He's just a good dude that relates well to other players. And I think he's somebody that said from the beginning he wanted to commit himself to this coaching possibility going forward. And I think he'll cut his teeth here in Detroit. We'll see where it goes. But I think in terms of a fit, I don't think Dan Campbell brings him if he doesn't think it's a great fit. And I think from everything I've seen from Dan, he knows the guys on this team, and the guys that will come in will get to know him. And I think it'd be a nice move by the team.
All right, we need to take a time out. Dan Campbell had a high praise of new offensive coordinator Drew Petzing, and the latest with Brian Flores' court case against the NFL coming your way next on First and North. Welcome back to First and North. I'm Cassie Carlson at our Fox 32 studios in Chicago, joined by Dan Miller in Detroit, Tim Van Voren in Milwaukee, and Pierre Nugent in Minneapolis. And Pierre, I want to start this segment with you because we talked about Brian Flores remaining in Minnesota. He's been in coaching talks over the last few seasons, but hasn't gotten a second chance at being a head coach because he is, of course, part of a discrimination lawsuit against the NFL for its hiring practices for black coaches after he was fired from Miami back in 2022. There's been some movement on this lawsuit this week. What's the latest that you know?
Well, the latest from what we know now is the NFL is probably not thrilled to hear that this case is going to be heard in public court. And, you know, over the years, the NFL has been all about protecting the shield. Well, it's going to be hard to do that when you're now forced to go into court and some of the dirty laundry that might be aired out in court in terms of the NFL's hiring practices, perhaps. Over this past offseason, we had 9 head coaching vacancies, none of them filled by a person of color. So the Rooney Rule perhaps not working to the effect that the league maybe had hoped. But Brian Flores, again, he has had a gripe ever since he was fired in Miami. The Dolphins, the Broncos, the Giants, some of the teams that were mentioned in this lawsuit. And now we're going to get a chance to see how it all unfolds in court. And again, Cassie, you have to imagine that the NFL is not too thrilled about this because they're going to be put to the fire in terms of what has happened in this case in particular and perhaps in cases of the past. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it all plays out in court.
Yeah, no doubt he's been one of the best coordinators in the league over the last 3 seasons. Dan, I want to go back to you because there's been a lot of talk about the Drew Petzing hire in Detroit. I want you to listen to what Dan Campbell and Drew Petzing had to say about their new partnership together.
Before I even brought Drew in, every time we had crossover tape, I loved watching his offense. I just thought he was pretty creative. I thought the run game had a lot of versatility, the play pass. They found ways to move the football. The guy's very calm, he's very confident, and he fits us. He fits us.
I think one of the things that's so exciting about being here in Detroit in this organization is, you know, the history, the culture, the fan base, and just how much it means to the city. And just seeing how much it meant to everybody, how they went about their business, you know, from ownership on down. I think it's just such an unbelievable organization to be a part of. And then obviously, you know, one of the things that makes this job exciting is the players. And to be able to come into this roster and this opportunity to coach these guys and work with these guys, knowing the talents are there, knowing that there's some work to be done, just extremely excited on so many different levels.
Dan, when you were just talking about Dan Skipper, you said that Campbell wouldn't bring in someone that he didn't feel like would be a fit on this coaching staff or in the entire organization. Do you feel like people are coming around with the hiring of Petzing? And I was listening to some radio show that kind of compared him to Ben Johnson. I know they're friends, but just the intensity that they speak with when they're talking about football is kind of similar.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I haven't had a lot of time around him yet, obviously, and we haven't seen him work yet here in Detroit with the weapons that they have. But I think from the beginning, what we were presented with was the like-mindedness between these two, the fact that they both want to grind it out. They want to run the football. They want to have Jared Goff under center and run play action off that run. And I think that probably, along with the attention to detail, which is very important, is what Dan Campbell's looking at when he brings him in. And don't forget Mike Kafka as well, because that's going to be a part of this a very, very well-respected offensive mind, 2 guys that will come in and take over. But look, I think there is rightfully a little bit of trepidation when it comes to this. Dan Campbell, for all that he has done, and I think one of his great strengths has been his coaching staff and the coaches he's hired that have developed players. He's 1 for 3 on offensive coordinators. Anthony Lynn did not work out. Ben Johnson did. John Morton didn't. So this is number 4 that we've seen since Dan Campbell came in here. On paper, it looks great. And on paper, it looks like this is the kind of thing that they want to work with and the kind of guy that they want to have in here calling the plays. But they do have some work to do in terms of personnel, because if they don't fix that offensive line, he'll run into the same problems they had last year.
Pierre, I'm sorry to hit you with so many quarterback questions when we're talking about the Vikings, but it's the most topical thing right now, it seems, in the offseason. I want you to take a listen to what former Vikings Anthony Barr and Eric Kendricks had to say about the Vikings' decision to let Sam Darnold go.
Should they have pushed harder, I guess, to sign it? Won 14 games with Minnesota last year and then lost the game against the Lions, played poorly that game, which was for the division, I believe. And then the following week they had to go to L.A. to play the Rams, and he threw up another stinker. Do you put more weight into the 14 games prior to those 2 games, or do those 2 games matter more because they're just magnified? Most people in that building knew that JJ just wasn't quite ready. I think he needed an older mentor to kind of shadow for another 2 years.
Mentorship is crucial. There's like some positions where it pays to have a veteran in front of you.
I think he still has potential. I think he can still be great. You know,
quarterback.
Year 2, right?
Yeah.
Year 2 playing full time.
So we're not like counting them out.
I think they do regret not signing a vet to let JJ learn from for another 1 or 2 years. And quarterbacks, they're not granted or afforded the same patience that a lot of different position players are given.
I guess my question is, was there a relationship between Carson Wentz and J.J. McCarthy where McCarthy could have learned from him? Because I look at what the Bears did with Caleb Williams in his rookie season. He did not have a veteran to learn behind, and we saw the consequences of it. Then they kind of, right the ship by bringing in Case Keenum, who acted as his kind of coach behind the scenes and in the meeting room. So do you feel like there was a relationship there, or did McCarthy just need another year of sitting and watching?
Well, I think the relationship was, as good as it could be, because if you recall, Carson Wentz wasn't brought into Minnesota until after training camp was over. So there wasn't really a lot of runway for J.J. McCarthy and Carson Wentz to develop that kind of bonding mentor-mentee type relationship, because when Carson Wentz came here, J.J. McCarthy was anointed quarterback QB1 already, and it was hitting the ground running. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity for them to really bond over that situation. And yes, even though J.J. McCarthy did get hurt, he could have learned from Carson Wentz and some of the tricks of the trade that he has learned in the NFL over the years. But there was never really that quickly established relationship like he did have with Sam Darnold in the previous year. He and Sam Darnold were pretty close. They learned from each other. Sam taught a lot of things to JJ. So there was that relationship in the year prior, but there wasn't that really type of relationship this season with Carson Wentz and J.J. McCarthy. It just wasn't there.
All right, we talk about relationships a lot in the Bears locker room this past season because they all talked about it at the end of the year, saying they're going to miss just the guys in the room because they know it's never going to be the same. And with the Bears cap situation not having much room right now, knowing there are going to be a handful of cap casualties, Tremaine Edmonds being one that would free up $15 million. DeAndre Swift is another one because he would free up $7 million. And he said to the Chicago Sun-Times that I don't want to play anywhere else other than Chicago. And I think of what DeAndre Swift meant to this offense. Like we mentioned before, the Bears had the third best running game in the league, and it was what Ben Johnson's entire offense was predicated on. And I also think back to the narrative between DeAndre Swift and Ben Johnson when Ben Johnson was hired, because Swift was in Detroit under Ben Johnson when the Lions drafted Jahmyr Gibbs. Then he was traded away, and a lot of people thought that Ben Johnson never believed in DeAndre Swift, but instead, he was really adamant that he thought that he had the skill set that he really wanted in this offense. He had a career year. He averaged 4.9 yards per carry, coming off a year where he had one of his worst averages per carry the year before. And I feel like DeAndre Swift is someone that the creativity and the way he's able to pass out of the backfield or catch passes out of the backfield is something that the Bears are going to want to keep around. And you're not going to replicate David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs and what they have in Detroit, but I feel like they got the closest that they could with DeAndre Swift and Kyle Monangai in Chicago. So he's one that I would actually keep, especially knowing that they're going to have a new running backs coach, and they want to try to keep the consistency on that end. I want to go back to the Max Crosby conversation because he is the big name when it comes to trade talks, and I want to hear what he had to say about those trade rumors and his name being in them.
People are going to have rumors. I just looked at my phone. I've been working all morning. I got everyone's hit me up. Did you say this? I can't control that. You earn that as a player. If I wasn't doing the right things and if I wasn't the person and player I was, people wouldn't be talking about all the nonsense. If you have drama, if you have a losing season, they just try to throw gasoline on the fire. I know what I'm about. I really don't care what everybody has to say. I used to a lot as a young guy. I really don't give a damn. People could have their own opinions. I know what's going on. I know my truth. I don't need to sit here and keep rehashing it to people that don't know what's going on. My focus has been on getting healthy because that's all I can control right now. That's all that matters to me is being with my daughters and being with my wife and taking care of myself.
All right, Tim, I want to go to you because after seeing the Packers trade for Micah Parsons last season, where they had to give up a key player plus 2 first-round picks, then seeing the impact that Parsons had on the defense when he was healthy, to me, I said before, it seems like a no-brainer if it only costs DJ Moore and a first-round pick for Max Crosby. What's your perception of how these edge rushers can change a defense, and did that seem like a low cost for you? If it's true, that's just what they're projecting.
It's a good rumor for sure, Cassie, and I would agree with you. It doesn't seem like a major price for the Bears to pay if it is indeed, if there's any legitimacy to it. And I go back to what Dan mentioned earlier, too, about the fit of somebody comes in either as a player or on the coaching staff. I think it's two-pronged with these edge rushers. You can see what they can provide on the field. If it's somebody who's still capable of getting something done from that position, Micah Parsons clearly was. Max Crosby, you would think, would be wherever he plays next season. But also the other side of that is how do they fit into the defense? defense and into the locker room. And Micah Parsons was an absolute perfect, seamless fit, even coming in right at the start of the regular season, and everything picked up and moved forward from there until his injury in Denver. Max Crosby, kind of an unapologetic type of guy, seems like he would be welcomed wherever he would come as well. So I don't think it's purely what is this guy as a football player. When you're giving up that kind of an investment, what can this guy provide to our culture as well, and how will he fit into the locker room? Parsons was terrific in Green Bay. I assume Crosby would be if he's on the move from the Raiders as well.
And we know he loves Ben Johnson. Dan, speaking of fit, would Chris Jones fit into Detroit's defense? Because a caller to 97.1 The Ticket in Detroit proposed a trade of sending wide receiver Amon-Ra St. Brown to the Chiefs for Chris Jones. People said they would do it in a heartbeat. Would you do that?
The host said he would do it in a heartbeat, and he's heard about it ever since. It did not go well for him in the aftermath of that. Look, Chris Jones could fit anywhere. I'm not trading Amon-Ra St. Brown to get him. I mean, I think Chris Jones is a defensive lineman who's probably seen his best days. I think he's still going to be an effective player for somebody if he's not in Kansas City, or he'll be an effective player for the Chiefs. But Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of the top wide receivers in the league right now. He is a leader on this team. He's a force multiplier on this team. He is a guy that everybody rallies around. He's a lion. I don't see him going anywhere, and you would have to dangle a lot in front of me before I'd even have that conversation.
All right, it's all because we're just a week out from the Combine, so we're waiting for some more things to happen, right, that we're proposing all these trades. We need to take our final timeout. Caleb Williams is the most bet player to win MVP next season, but when it comes to shooting threes, yeah, not so much. We show you his performance during NBA All-Star Weekend when we come back on First and North. Well, if you missed this over the weekend, Bears quarterback Caleb Williams took part in the Celebrity All-Star three-point contest at NBA All-Star Weekend. And guys, he finished in last place. His stat line, 4 points, 2 for 15 from deep, and 1 air ball. And he lost to an influencer, Drewski, that went on Instagram and said, hanging them up after tonight. This is disappointing to me because the Bears have a basketball hoop in their locker room, and Caleb Williams was frequently shooting the ball in the locker room, and so he just couldn't perform on the biggest stage. Tim, which division quarterback would you pick to win a three-point shooting contest?
Oh, Jordan Love. Jordan Love used to be a major hooper at Utah State with Sam Merrill, who's on the Cavaliers. He was at Utah State at the same time, and Love said, Merrill could shoot it, but they had some major goes at each other when they were playing. So I'll take Jordan Love in that.
Pierre, would you take JJ?
No, I would not take J.J. McCarthy. The one guy I think I might take on the basketball court, though, is Lamar Jackson. I mean, with that speed and agility, I think Lamar Jackson would be terrific on the basketball court.
Dan Miller, anyone come to mind?
There's tape of Jared playing high school basketball, and he's 6'5", so let's see what he can do out there. I mean, he's a pretty fluid athlete when it comes to handling a football. I think he could probably shoot a basketball, so I'm going to go ahead and back my guy. Let's see Jared behind the arc out there. He can't do any worse than Caleb did.
Oh, yeah. Hey, if he wins MVP, no one will remember this, but I'm sure he'll get some flack for that in the locker room. All right, everyone, we got to go. Great show as always. I'm Cassie Carlson for Dan Miller, Tim Van Voort, and Pierre Nugent. Thanks for watching First and North. We'll see you back here next week.